couple of months ago, a friend of mine invited me along to a trip that he had been planning. And at first I was excited, but hesitant. I worried about getting the time off of work, I worried about the cost of flights and what we might spend for the rest of the trip. But after going around in circles in my head over the decision, I found out that this is what happens when you just say yes. This is Iceland. And so, the journey began. I made my way to Reykjavik to meet with my fellow travellers, with whom I'd be spending the next 7 days at 1,300 kilometres as we took on the legendary Route 1, a ring road that paves the way around the entirety of the island. But before all of that, I had to meet them.
We're in Reykjavik. I now need to find the 3 other people I'm actually travelling with because, well, I know one of them very well. I used to live with him. But the 2 others, I don't think I've actually met. Maybe one of them for like half an hour. It's going to be a bit interesting. Find out who I'm spending the next 7 days of my life with. Let's figure it out. I'm assuming they're through here. Oh, indeed, my ride is here. That's our car. That's a good start. That one? Yeah. That looks good. Yes. You alright?
Welcome.
Marie, Andy, Marie. Hello.
Hey, that's very official.
Yeah, very official. Well, I would go for the hug, but you're in a car, so.
So, having met up with Max and Mary, we were just waiting for the 4th member of the team, Vince. He was getting in the next day, so we chilled in Reykjavik for an evening before heading back and picking him up. Now with the full team assembled and another night spent together exploring Reykjavik as well as actually getting to know each other a bit better before setting off on our grand tour of the country. We were making good progress, but we might have had a little bit too much to drink the night before, and we did have to take a few stops so that Maxime, who was feeling particularly unwell, could gather himself.
With a very unwell Maxime.
We also noticed that Iceland is very windy, something that would become a bit more serious later on. But for now, we got our first experience with the Icelandic roads. And as we drove and looked out, wondering what might become of the next week, we soon came across one of the famous Icelandic phenomena, that sometimes the snow, rain and water here doesn't just fall down to the ground, but rather shoots out from the ground instead. Witnessing the geyser erupt was undoubtedly very cool. However, it was something to see on our way to the next destination. And it wasn't until I saw this next thing that I realised that for the next 5 or so days, I was going to be blown away by the scale, power, and beauty of Iceland. The light was beginning to fade, and we had heard that there was a storm coming that evening. But before we got to the guest house we'd be staying at that night, we had one more thing to see along the way. The light now fully faded, and the storm that we had been told about earlier having reached us, we drove cautiously to the remote guest house that we'd be staying in. Now on the southernmost tip of the island, we were fully exposed to the full force of the Atlantic winds as they battered the edges of the car, the guest house, and soon us. We pulled up to the guest house and at first were reveling in the experience of witnessing winds unlike anything I'd ever seen before. You couldn't even open the car door without it being completely slammed shut against you. So we parked up near the front door, with only around 10 meters from our car to the building. However, the winds had now reached incredible speeds, and as we wrestled our way from the car to the front door, a great gust of wind ripped through the landscape, forcing me and Mary flying forward. I managed to find my footing at the last moment and grab onto the outer door of the building. However, Mary wasn't so fortunate.
Oh shit, let's get inside.
When she had fallen, Mary hit her head against the side of the building, as well as cutting up her knee quite badly. She wasn't completely responsive to a lot of our questions, and this obviously greatly worried us. We called the emergency services as quickly as possible, but due to the storm, it was going to take them some time to get here. During that time, we got what first aid equipment we could from the lodge, but it being so remote and us with limited supplies, we couldn't do a whole lot. We did know that if we were going to stay there that evening, we were going to have to get at least our food out of the car. So Vince stayed with Mary to monitor how she was doing, while Max and I headed back out into the storm to get our clothes and our food into the room. With this much wind, rain and darkness, we might have accidentally got in the wrong car at first, but upon realising that, the rest of the mission went down pretty smooth.
Is that our door? Oh, okay.
Apart from Max slamming the door into my arm, that did really hurt, but there were much more pressing matters at that time, and luckily, after 40 or so minutes, first responders arrived on the scene. After being checked over by the medics as thoroughly as possible, they gave us the okay to have her stay with us at the guest house as long as we monitored her progress and saw that her condition did not deteriorate. And so we spent a slightly nervy evening where Mary didn't completely recollect what had just happened.
Because basically what happened is because of the wind, like I felt like I hit a wall or something.
But over the course of a few hours, she did seem to become more of herself again. At this point, late into the evening, those signs of this hopefully not being as serious as it could have been were a great relief to everyone. So, bit of an unscheduled turn of events there, but she seems to be alright, bit of a concussion. We had the medics come out, we're just going to sit tight through this storm, and hopefully in the morning the weather should be a bit better. I think, well, I definitely am, and I guess the others are just really tired now. So let's rest up and keep going tomorrow.
Morning now, and luckily Mary seems to be remembering stuff from the trip and remembering who we are, who she is. So we're feeling pretty relieved about that. That was a pretty horrible 4-hour period last night, but signs are good. So for now we're going to take it easy but press on. And also we've been blessed with a pretty epic sunrise. So let's continue on.
Having spent the last couple of days being battered by wind and snow, it was incredibly refreshing to wake up to the other side of Icelandic weather. It's a low hovering sun that brings out the vastness of this place. And taking full advantage of this weather, we continued our path along Route 1 and came across another of Iceland's many breathtaking waterfalls. The morning sun that was still rising within the sky began to shine on the mist of the waterfall, spawning a rainbow just 20 or so meters away. Witnessing a rainbow just spawning in front of you is a pretty unreal feeling. After being pretty blown away by the ethereal nature of what we had just seen, it only made sense that while the sun was still rising in the sky, we had heard nearby that if you wanted to continue to be mind blown, the best way to do that was to head to the coast. So, taking a 40-minute drive or so, we found out that they were right.
Probably shouldn't take you back. Since I've been broke, you didn't want to hold me down or care for me. So if you came back in my life, I had to decide whether I want you to stay or turn away.
Man, I'm getting So within 10 minutes it's now not windy, not snowing, and looking kind of insane.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now, after chilling at the beach for a bit and checking out some of the famous coastal lookout spots, we had a long drive ahead of us, around 4 hours to make it to our next accommodation. On this drive, as we continued around Route 1, one of the things that really stuck out was just how quickly the scenery changes from a sunny coastal drive to seemingly endless boulder fields of ice. It does mean that when you're driving through, there's always something to look at. Just glancing out the window, you just get to see some of the most unreal scenery. As we approached the area in which we were staying that night, down in the southeast of Iceland, we realised that we might just have enough sunlight left in the day if we were really quick to get a hike in and go up to a viewing spot not too far away from where we were going to stay. So, we decided to give it a go, and I am so happy we did. Luckily it was a relatively short hike, and we made our way to the summit past some incredible views and some smaller waterfalls, up to another waterfall that waits at the top of this trail. These giant hexagonal pillars getting carved out of the earth, and water being forced over it into ice pools below. As we had got there pretty late, we were actually the only people up there, so we were able to get up close and really check it out.
Yeah, this waterfall is pretty cool. Especially because there's no one here.
Yeah, the hexagons are insane. However, now as the sun began to set and leave just a trail of light in the sky, it was when we turned around and went to regroup at the top of this trail that we were given one of those moments that just puts everything into perspective. Sat just the four of us, three of us who had never even met before this week began. Having gone through somewhat of a difficult night previously, we sat together as a group, as if we had always known each other, and shared an incredible time under that vast open Icelandic sky. Now, with the sun having fully set, it was time for us to make our way back down and find where we were going to be sleeping that night. After we made our way through the darkness to where we would be staying that night, we had one final thing to deal with for the day. So, that's where our key is meant to be.
Oh, we don't have a key.
No, we do not have a key, and the door is not open. Brilliant. Right, well, another hostel, another issue. Let's go. Let's figure this out. There's a contact. Let's look at that. Thank you.
Sweet, we're sorted.
No problem. It's upstairs in the end. Yeah.
The keys acquired, there's nothing left to do today but sleep and ready ourselves for exploring Iceland's largest and oldest glacier. We got ourselves up and drove through the early hours of the morning. You see, to access these glaciers, you need something a little more specialised than just a normal 4x4. So we were driving to a meet-up point, where we'd then take one of these pretty sick-looking modified off-roaders to take us up on top of the glacier, before then venturing within and finding out what over 1,000 years of compacted ice looks like from the inside. We made our way through the deep blue labyrinth of the ice caves. It really can feel like you're on an alien planet at times, where everything is cold to the touch and these jagged and smooth shapes have formed themselves over thousands of years of pressure. So after leaving the alien landscape of the inside of the glacier behind us, we, didn't really know what to do. We had the whole day ahead of us to drive quite a distance to a very remote cabin we'd be staying at, but before we got to any of that, we had about 8 hours to do something with. That led us to returning to the epic grayscale of another black sand beach. Just a nice chill morning to process what we'd just seen.
Oh, there's a
Sea lion. Where?
After chilling on the beach for a bit, I realised I hadn't actually brought enough SD cards with me. I had already shot quite a lot of footage and I was running pretty low. This was a bit of an issue because, like I just said, we're staying at a very remote cabin where there's definitely not anywhere you can buy SD cards anywhere near. So I charted us a route where we would pass by a small settlement, see if they had anywhere in town that could get me what I needed. Upon arriving at this town, we found that the only electronics store in the whole place just happened to be closed on the one day we were there. Not a great stroke of luck, and so back on the road we went. We also knew that another storm was coming in that evening. Instead of experiencing it as much as we did the first time around, this time we decided that when we got to our cabin, we were going to hunker down and just chill. No need to be getting blown around in the storm this time. After a few hours of driving, the winds had picked up, the sun had been obscured by layers of clouds, and heavy snowfall returned. So upon making it to our cabin, we got inside, got the heating up, and chilled out. So it wasn't until that next morning when we could properly appreciate where we had just slept the night, and ready ourselves for a long driving stint through one of the most incredible sections of road laid anywhere in the world. This section of Route 1 where you rise up into the mountaintops is just crazy. These long gorges of ice cut into the earth just to the side of the road, while often the road disappears nearly completely because of the snowfall. As soon as the sun hits this snow, it's just glistening all over. So cool. Then as you continue over these peaks, you reach areas where still active volcanoes are being used to power nearby settlements, and these giant geothermal vents are just spitting out steam. So we drove through all of this, taking in as much as possible to get to where we would stay tonight. Today was a day of a lot of driving. The scenery made it fly by. It really didn't feel that bad, but we were on the opposite side of the island to where the airport was, and I was leaving in 2 days, which wasn't something I wanted to be thinking about just yet, but we had to keep it in mind in terms of actually getting back in time. But along the way, we did manage to find somewhere that sold SD cards and other storage stuff, so that sorted me out on that front. And now it was just a case of checking in at another remote lodge and seeing where we'd be that night.
Merci.
Same couch, different color.
Oh yeah, except this one's got a dog pillow on it.
Pretty shortly after arriving at this lodge, we found that not only did it coincidentally have the same couch as the last lodge we stayed in, as Vince pointed out, but it also gave us front row seats for catching a sunset. After the long drive during the day, everyone just wanted to relax. And there's no better way to do that than to visit the famed thermal springs. After a couple of hours of just chilling out and bathing, we all made our way back feeling pretty relaxed. However, just before going to bed, hearing there might be some solar activity, we might as well go have a look outside. After a short walk into this ice field, and looking up, seemingly out of nowhere, the sky turns green. Seeing that I'd be leaving kind of soon, felt like a parting gift. After that evening, we still found ourselves with the problem that we were on the other side of the island. We now only had about 40 hours to get me back to the airport. Luckily for us, Route 1 continued to provide incredible views. As we made our way back to the west, we would spend one more night in a guest house found at the end of gravel farm tracks with not much around it other than great views. And after a night of recharging, we were straight back on the road. It was on this stretch of journey that, with the backdrop of huge mountainsides, glimmering water and continued snow, I reflected on the week that I'd had. More so than just the epic stuff that we saw along the way, the countless waterfalls, the insane sections of road leading into snow-topped mountains, and all of the other stuff between. I came out of this trip pleased that I had had an amazing week, but more so than that, I'd created new memories with an old friend, and new friends with the same memories. I thought back for a moment on when I first received the message asking if I wanted to come along on this trip, and how my immediate reaction, as I said, had been one of worry about cost and timing and all that other stuff that you get caught up often with in life. Sitting on this road trip back to the airport, and although I sat wishing that I could have another 7 days there, I realised that this week, the memories shared, the friends made, and the epic stuff seen is the reason you should just say yes.